upon which our congregations in Woodbury and Meriden make their home was not empty wilderness when Europeans first arrived in Connecticut. We begin each of our services acknowledging this fact as a step on the road to justice. There are 5 recognized indigenous tribal nations in Connecticut: the Mashantucket Pequot, the Mohegan, the Eastern Pequot, the Golden Hill Pawcatucket, and the Shagatoke. The Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society and the UUMeriden acknowledge that our congregations occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of these nations. In offering this land acknowledgement, we commit to learning more about these hosts and neighbors, and we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experience.
Good morning. My name is Anita Sanders, and I am a worship associate at UUMeriden. I wrote these words to begin our understanding of our part in widening the circle of our Unitarian Universalist community. We honor the members of the Commission on Institutional Change for 3 years of emotionally and physically hard work to produce a report. We honor those who could not reopen wounds, who could not believe yet that Unitarian Universalism could change. We honor those who came forward with their stories of the harm done to them at all levels of our faith community. Let us open ourselves this morning to listen and to heal. Come, let us worship together. As Unitarian Universalists, we start each service by lighting the chalice. The flame from this match or lighting device is not a new flame. It comes from my heart and yours, no matter how far apart we are or when you are watching this. It is the fire of love.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
Today, I'm reading a great book called Not My Idea, written and illustrated by Anastasia Higginbotham. Thank you to Doder Press and the author for permission to share the book with you. Please go to doderpress.com or your favorite bookstore to order your own copy. In a 1993 interview, Toni Morrison said about racism in America, white people have a very, very serious problem, and they should start thinking about what they can do about it. She added, take me out of it. Those words landed in me as a direct command. I made this book for my own white sons with help from their teachers and mine. It's dedicated to the Brooklyn Free School, where my family was first called upon to engage with whiteness in order to dismantle white supremacy. It's usually because they're scared too. Who is that with their hands up? Why is that policeman screaming at him? Bang, 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 bang. They want to bury the truth. You don't need to worry about this. You're safe. Understand? Our family is kind to everyone. We don't see color. Deep down, we all know color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and in how you see the world. I want to bring my aunt a gift. This will only take a minute. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences, including which neighborhoods welcome you. So relieved you got here safely. Why wouldn't we? The protests. They're blocking the road. Breaking news. Family speaks out on police shooting. You may get the message that racism is happening only to black and brown people. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. I can't watch the news. That police officer was just doing his job. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, your own family. Are you all right? Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it. You can bring your curiosity to learn about it and see that it's true. I'll be over here if you need me, okay? In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against black people for 400 years. All along, every step of the way, people who love justice and love each other have been fighting back. Many white people did things they never should have done. Denied opportunity, denied housing, denied voting rights. Many other white people failed to see the problem with this. Yes, ma'am. These choices put wealth and power into white hands, homes, and neighborhoods. Exploited the love and labor of black women. Some white people joined the leaders of black liberation. Julian Bond and members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Angelina Grimke and Sarah Grimke. Abolitionist suffragist sisters, nuns and fellow marchers on the Selma to Montgomery March 1965. Colin Kaepernick kneels, 2017. John Lewis and fellow demonstrators kneel, 1962. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing and keeps being the same. And yet, just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this, to connect. But connecting means opening, and opening sometimes feels, our car's parked over here, love, like breaking. Mom, I don't feel good. Oh, should I pull over? I need to know what's going on. What are you talking about? Why didn't anyone teach me real history? I do see color. I see yours and mine and everybody's. You can't hide what's right in front of me. I know that what that police officer did was wrong. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice is possible. Okay, geez, you don't have to yell, but only if we're honest with each other and ourselves. Yes, I see a playground over there. Want to get some air? Your history's not all written yet. What do you want it to say? The end. But wait, there's more. Some activities and things to think about. Want to know whose liberation you are fighting for? Your own. White supremacy has been lying to kids for centuries. White supremacy is pretend, but the consequences are real. The truth is much simpler. Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. Dude, we can see your ponytail. Contract binding you to whiteness. You get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors. And whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit and your soul. Sign here. Land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. You can be white without signing on to whiteness. Juliet Hampton Morgan, 1914 to 1957, was a white librarian who fought for racial justice in Montgomery, Alabama. When Juliet was riding the bus and the white driver would refuse to pick up a black bus rider, even after he collected their fare, Juliet would pull the emergency cord and raise HE double hockey sticks until the driver did his job. This was an act of love for herself and for the community to which she belonged. What she did is called disrupting white supremacy. Justice grows inside yourself like a bean sprout in a milk carton. What if it dies? Plant it again. Never stop planting justice. A strong internal sense of justice will not fail you, even when a lack of justice in the world does. Childhood innocence is overrated. Knowledge is power. Get some. Grow wise. Make history. Thanks again to author and illustrator Anastasia Higginbotham and to Daughter Press for permission to share this book with you. Please go to daughterpress.com or your favorite bookstore to order your own copy.
Martin Luther King's Guiding Pillars, written by John Paul Lederach, who is a senior fellow at the Humanity United and professor emeritus at the University of Notre Dame. Everyone seeks to speak for and protect the Constitution, almost as if our shared document is a victim. I would offer that the deeper casualty lies with the loss of our basic social contract. We note its disappearance when toxic social dynamics spill into the mainstream of our collective life. We also know from settings of armed conflict and from our own exemplars in this country who never stopped building the more perfect union that it is possible to reverse those dynamics. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. consistently appealed to guiding pillars that sustain the commitment to the social contract while pursuing long-sought change for equity and equality in the midst of deep division. His first pillar referenced that waiting for change was no longer an option. We can no longer accept the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. This temporal pillar required such immediate action that he referred to it as the fierce urgency of now. His second pillar constantly reminded people that the struggle for equality and dignity unfolds by way of a long and difficult pathway. Hope requires patience and persistence, precisely because the arc of the moral universe is long, even as it bends towards justice. Dr. King's vision never wavered in the third pillar, the commitment to nonviolence and appreciation for our ultimate interdependence. In his I Have a Dream speech, he noted, and I quote, "Their freedom is inextricably bound with our freedom," followed by the shortest single sentence in the speech, "We cannot walk alone." These pillars offer the way forward into renewing our social contract and reversing toxic dynamics. Act on and walk into what you know to be true. Start locally. Reach out beyond your comfort zone. Commit to nonviolence. Always protect the dignity of others. Walk together. In this, the stone of hope is hewn.
Lift every voice and sing till earth, heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our God, true to our God, true
Hate will never conquer hate. Only love can do that. Rarely do we see splashed across the news media such an obvious and prolonged use of hate and dividing action as we have witnessed in the last 2 weeks. We are here to reimagine ourselves as the beacons of love so needed in our world. Today, I am talking about using our understanding of our principles to heal ourselves and our congregation and ultimately our word. Many things are changing in the Unitarian Universalist Association as a result of the report by the Commission on Institutional Change. This talk is about what that report means to us. This is not a class, and I promise that a class will be available as soon as I can make it so. The report is about what needs to be done to heal the oppression of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in Unitarian Universalism. There are 2 parts. The first part is the stopping of the harm by white people. We who are white are being asked to stop the harm we are doing by actions and by complicity in others' actions. The second part is to rise up the Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color by giving them the resources and support to fully do their work in our faith community. The report also includes work to involve youth and young adults in our faith community. The report describes the harm done by the UUA Board of Trustees. Even those of us who were paying attention to the situation described were surprised at what was hidden from us. The report is clear about the harm done to Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color by the UUA and all of us. The report lays out a roadmap for healing white supremacy. That healing is not unlike the work of healing our country. It asks the teachers among us to show the way. As a part of the response, the Falls Collective of Meadville Lombard Theological School has given us a course called Beloved Conversations. About a dozen of us are participating. This course will last for 3 years, progressing from individual healing to congregation healing to world healing. It has only begun, and I am changed already by the work. I have told some stories of my own learning. I was driving on Route 15, which I do a lot between Stratford and Meriden, when I was stuck behind a slow-moving car. Now, the speed limit is 55, and slow-moving is defined as anything less than 65 in the right lane. It was pointed out to me that the car may be driven by a person of color, and that being stopped for speeding is a life-threatening occurrence. I never thought about that until that moment. It has been announced that General Assembly 2021 will be virtual again this year. It is sad for me to miss working with the people I only see each June at GA. Those people, like me, have the time and can afford to go, or like me, have had the financial support of my congregation, which allows me to go. I never thought of going to GA as a privilege. What can we expect from the report by the Commission on Institutional Change? The report is not like other General Assembly actions for congregations and individuals. The report is more about vertical relationships in Unitarian Universalism. We already are working on the relationship between UUCM and Moose. We are being asked to start or continue a relationship with the New England region. The region is about the work of committees and commissions. The report is about the work of committees and commissions of the UUA. The report is about the makeup and working of the Board of Trustees. The report is about accountability and reporting to us by our UUA president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. This has already begun. Let's talk about our relationship to the region. Many congregations in New England see themselves as silos. They don't want everyone else involved in their congregational life. Possibly this is inherited from our Puritan ancestors. While we were talking about our ancestor pilgrims, we unfortunately missed some lessons we might have gotten from being at General Assembly in Providence last June. For example, do you know whose land you are sitting on right now? This is Mohegan land. We white people not only took their land and tried hard to eradicate them, but we are fairly ignorant of their spiritual beliefs and practices. This ignorance is made more profound because we are a people who spend our lives searching for our own spirituality. We missed hearing about the Wampanoag tribe, who lived mostly in Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts and Cape Cod. The current administration is in court proceedings to remove their tribal status and take their land. We would have learned of their fight to keep the land they have lived on for 2,000 years. We would have been asked to support their efforts. The concept in indigenous culture that I find most difficult is the respect for ancestors and the importance of being good ancestors to the generations that follow. Getting back to talking about our relationship with the New England region, I have personally met and worked with several of them. I have taken workshops and asked for advice and help in running the congregation in Stratford. The result is that they know me and can call on me for help when some other congregation needs some advice or help with their problem. I have been able to help congregations that I never heard of and don't know anyone there. It is not just about us as one congregation. It is about our covenant with the UUA to help each other. The report asks us to consider who else we work with outside of our congregation, in our local community, and beyond. We are being asked to look at those organizations as we are looking at our own congregation. Do they center the work of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color? A good example is Morrow Monday, Connecticut. UUMeriden knows Bishop John Selders and Lady Pamela Selders well. They are known to work with groups that likewise center Black voices. Several years ago, they broke ties with a group claiming to be about racial justice because that organization was mostly white and not listening to other voices. It is important to listen to the language of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. At General Assembly, when the first resolution to support Black Lives Matter was debated, the words "abolish prisons" caused a debate the likes of which I hope I never witness again. The white people would not accept the language which was central to the issue of those writing the resolution. That resolution ended up with a parenthetical phrase attached, which served to whitewash the issue. Today, we are still battling words like defund the police. We should be concerned that the group in Maryland, in Meriden, looking at police issues, does not turn into a compromise-making group. It would not be okay to accept the result that the police would agree to unjustly kill 10% less people of color next year as compared to this year. If we look back in U.S. history to find words of Black leaders, we can see the words in 1963 of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington in his "I Have a Dream" speech. Dr. King talked about issues of his day, segregation and police brutality. Dr. King talked about the Declaration of Independence words that all men are created equal as a promissory note that has not been paid because of insufficient funds. And then he went on to describe his dream, that Black children and white children could walk hand in hand. The fulfillment of Dr. King's dream would require us to stop teaching our children to hate.
Every year when the Martin Luther King holiday rolls around, one of my concerns is that we do not whitewash Dr. King and minimize just how radical he was, nor do we minimize his entire agenda, that we forget sometimes he was just as strident about being anti-war and anti-capitalist as he was about being anti-racist. White people in general find Dr. King's commitment to nonviolence both reassuring and non-threatening. It is much easier to support a racial justice agenda when there's a commitment for it to be peaceful. And yet Dr. King's nonviolence, although it was a commitment to being nonviolent, was not a commitment to being passive. Nonviolence is an active form of protest. It is active resistance, really forcing the question by creating conflict in a nonviolent way. We want to make sure that we understand Dr. King's philosophy developed as his civil rights activism wore on. He began to tie the struggle for civil rights to the struggle for peace and to the struggle for fair wages and a decent working environment, and realize the dangers of capitalism. Minimization of racism and white supremacy culture is built into America, as is the 4th of July and apple pie. We must not buy into these false racial justice pleas for unity. Right now we have a lot of calls for unity and calming down the situation and the temperament because of the coup attempt in Washington, D.C. And yes, reconciliation is important, but we cannot reconcile across that political divide until and unless it also includes repentance. Genuine repentance for racial injustice, bigotry, hatred, and violence, and a promise to make amends. We don't want to let go of justice just to be nice and get along to go along, because that is a way to push real justice down the road and not actually achieve the ends of creating beloved community. Racists and white supremacists invoke and incite violence and then call for unity and not rocking the boat. Well, causing confrontation is part of what genuine protest does. It puts a conflict in front of people that they have to deal with. Our received white culture, white supremacy culture, is oriented towards being kind and not making waves, not rocking that boat. And yet, the reality is seeking justice really does sometimes require creating discomfort on purpose and engaging the uncomfortable on purpose and rocking that boat a little bit. So I want us to keep that in mind as we take a look at what some of the recommendations of the Commission on Institutional Change offer in their report, Widening the Circle of Concern. Part of their recommendations are addressed specifically to congregations and to congregational practice. So this is what they recommend congregations consider. Appoint someone to be a liaison to the UUA. While many congregations have trouble supporting a full denominational affairs committee, they write, a point person can monitor and make sure leaders and publications have a representative in the congregation. They recommend that we ensure that lifespan religious educators are focused on building understanding about equity and inclusion, and this includes providing opportunities for cross-cultural immersion through partnership and the use of video and film and other online resources. They recommend that we do basic hospitality role-playing. I love this idea. And education each year for people involved in membership and greeting and teaching. I think it's a wonderful way to practice ways in which we can genuinely be welcoming to people who come to us and to each other. They recommend putting money in the budget for education around anti-oppression, which is wonderful. That would cover things such as the beloved Conversations tuition, or maybe help pay a speaker's fee, or for people to take an online course or webinar. They recommend a line item for scholarships to General Assembly. I'm really happy to say Moose did that. Their board did that last year. I encourage Meriden to do that as well. And make it available first to people who most need to connect, Indigenous people, people of color, young adults, and youth. They recommend that we form justice partnerships with organizations led by those most affected by the issues and follow their lead. I think there's been a move to do this in both our congregations. In Woodbury, we are following the lead of the young leaders and the leaders of color at Justice Woodbury and Justice Southbury. And in Meriden, we've learned to follow the leaders of the sanctuary and immigrant communities. And we're learning to follow the lead of our Black leaders out of Hartford and Moral Mondays, Connecticut. So which of these recommendations would we focus on? Which will work for us? And who will lead this work in our congregations? Those are some questions we all need to answer now. Will social justice committees be charged with doing this work and making sure we follow these recommendations? Will the board? Should we appoint a task force? What are the best steps, the best recommendations for a congregation to focus on first? Which ones might not be as easily attainable or the congregation might not be as ready to work on as some others. How do we prioritize? This is the work we now face in our congregations, being asked to engage this work by the Unitarian Universalist Association through the Commission on Institutional Change via their report, Widening the Circle of Concern. Engaging this work in some manner will be the 30 Days of Love focus this year for the Side with Love campaign. And perhaps that can be a way for us to kickstart our involvement with following these recommendations. I believe that if we ignore these recommendations and ignore the invitation to do this work, we become, in a sense, the philosophical equivalent of the Republican lawmakers who spew lies about a stolen election, use dog whistles for campaign slogans, and then call for peace and unity when the hate they've incited causes violent insurrection. You know, we must have the integrity and the consistency in our approach to say, okay, we need to engage this work. How are we going to do it? And not only is this work the right thing to do, but it's the practical thing to do. One of the things this report, Widening the Circle of Concern, tells us is that congregations that engage this type of work will be congregations that lead us into the future. And congregations that remain removed from this work will continue to be groups of aging white people, and their congregations will continue to slowly, if not quickly, fade away. So let's engage vitality, let's engage widening the circle of concern, let's engage dismantling white supremacy culture in ways that are appropriate to our congregation in terms of what we prioritize and how we engage that work, who leads us in that work. I look forward to doing this with you. We hold in our hearts with love and compassion this week Scott Bernard and his loved ones, as Scott passed away recently. Also Connie Welton, who has been hospitalized, Kathy Lindberg, who has COVID-19, Dawn Dell, who will have surgery on February 3rd, and Lisa Quint, who will also be having surgery, and also Donna Stimpson, who's been dealing with some health issues. We also hold in our hearts with love and compassion all who were injured or killed in the coup attempt on January 6th at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Spirit of life, we are weary with pandemic and the dis-ease of treason, sedition, based in white nationalist hatred and bigotry. We are tired of quarantine and tired of lies and gaslighting. We long for the rising spirit of justice and look with hope to a new administration coming in to renew our souls for the old and ongoing struggle to create beloved community. Give us the courage of Dr. King, who sat with a cup of coffee at his kitchen table and prayed, "I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I am afraid." Grant us the power of imagination to hear and feel the presence of the divine as Dr. King did, to hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for justice, stand up for truth," and the spirit of the divine will always be at your side. Give us the courage to be the good Samaritan and help the person beaten and left for dead on the Jericho Road. And give us the creative spark of imagination to find ways to make the Jericho roads of the world safer for everyone. Give us the courage to take up our work of dismantling white supremacy culture in our congregation, our association, and our community. Spark our imagination so we may find ways to speak hard truths and hold the line of justice without being mean, cruel, or condescending. Give us the courage to name minimizing and whitewashing, and the imagination to do so in ways people with hardened hearts will hear and understand. Give us the courage to act for racial justice with fierce urgency now, and the imagination to find ways to explain why we can't wait for justice, to those who would stall, delay, and derail doing what is right. Give us the courage to take responsibility for our own actions and failings, and the imagination to communicate our racial justice journey to others so that they may journey with us. Give us the courage and the imagination to respond to hate with love. May we always side with love and with all of love's prophets. This we pray in the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Amen.
Our service may be drawing to a close, but there's always coffee hour. Please pour a cup of your favorite beverage and zoom on in. Join us for coffee at go.uucentralct.org/coffee. That's go.uucentralct.org/coffee. We'll see you in a few minutes.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until the killing of black men, black motherless sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white motherless sons. That which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes to me. Young people come first. They have the courage where we failed. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gale, the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. Struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way our struggle survives. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. can be quite difficult. I bow to no man's word. Oh, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
We extinguish this flame so that we may take it back into our hearts and use it in our lives to spread love.